Hello, 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 my loves. My name is Dijana, and I want to welcome you to the Nova Holistic Podcast. We're on episode 26 today, and today I bring you an extraordinary woman, yet again, a beautiful shaman, a lady I've spoken to a couple of times that I really love. I love her energy. I love her work. So I can't wait to introduce you and welcome lovely Kat Rambo to Nova Holistic. Hi, honey.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's such a pleasure. It's so good. I have really actually enjoyed connecting with your field overall just the last couple of times that we've spoken, and I'm really happy that we finally came to a date and a time that was good for both of us, for us to have
Yes.
this conversation and talk about some really um, do you know how the image that I get when I think about this episode and the two of us together is what do they call it? I'm saying like a hut. You and me sitting in a hut, and there's like the sweat lodge, like a sweat lodge kind of situation, and we're just gonna sweat out all the deep and transformative stuff.
I love it.
That's the image that I get when I think about our conversation, and I
I love
cannot
it.
wait to dive in deep into this. So to start with, without further ado, I would love, Kat, if you would just introduce yourself briefly. Tell us about um, I kind of want to say whatever is in your heart to express right now about who you are, what you are, your journey, whatever. Go ahead, please.
Wow, I love the openness. I think that's one of the things I like so much about you is your openness and how you bring everything together. It's very integrative. I love that. Let's see about me. I think I'm a little bit of opposites, right? I'm somewhere in the middle of many things. I have a background in sciences and finance, but I work in holistic healing. And I love modern research and, the modern medicine. And I also love traditional healing and indigenous practices. And I think my magic is bringing those together to help
Mm.
us in all four quadrants of the medicine wheel: mind, body, emotion, and spirit. And I think what I love so much about your perspective, besides your fabulous, radiant personality, I just love talking
Mhm.
to you, is your focus on holistic. I love how you put that in the name of your program, Whole Nova Holistic, about bringing all of these things together in order to find a new path, made of a little bit of everything that helps, right? And so I think that is where I sit, and that's, I think, what attracted me initially to your work, and being part of what it is that your mission supports. I love that. Is that
Thank
makes
you,
sense?
honey. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really great. So, let me ask you then, in the spirit of what you said, let's start to unpack sort of mm, what the thing that stood out to me was I don't think that I knew that you have a background in science and finance. I don't think I knew that about you. Both of these, obviously, by nature, in terms of even the nature of energy, are quite sort of left brained and live in the sort of more analytical, logical sphere. Um, I'm so curious about the version of Cat Rambo that was that, and then the bridge that you crossed to
Mm.
get to the other side, and then are now in that beautiful place of integrating all of that. Can you
Ah,
tell us a little bit about that?
I love
Tell
that.
me about the version of you that was science and finance.
That version was also spiritual. I started doing readings when I was a kid, I was like in
Mm.
my early teens. It was my family's from Louisiana, so I don't know what that means to an Australian, but we grew up with like voodoo and root work and
Oh,
spirituality and
okay.
talking to ghosts and like all this kind of stuff just in my culture. So it was always part of my life as well. But I think what happened is I was encouraged in my obsessive curiosity. And especially at the time, there weren't a lot of concrete answers available in the space of spirituality, and especially at the time, now most people have heard the word shaman.
Mhm.
Most people have seen a tarot deck, many, many, many. So, but at the
Mm.
time, outside of my culture group, it wasn't extremely common. It was very esoteric. It was very woo woo. It was very like, oh, you're a fairy. You don't know what the hell's going on in life, right?
Mm.
But I was also groomed by my father, who's an accountant and like a hotshot litigator too. But then my mom's an artist, right? So I had both of these to come together. And my obsessive curiosity, no matter what it was always encouraged. And I think what fascinated me about the sciences was answers. I wanted answers. So I
Mhm.
actually went to university and studied physics. I was halfway through a degree in physics when I
Wow.
realized like I didn't have time or money for a PhD, and I didn't want to be stuck in a lab underground anyway because I was interested in, of
Mm.
course, everything to do with the extremes. I wanted quantum mechanics and I wanted aerospace. So nothing in between. I didn't care about the motion of the earth. I wanted to know the unknowable. And I think that's really what I was seeking. And there was a period of time where I was a proselytizing atheist. And during that time, I think that wasn't even true. I was looking for higher meaning in science, and I got very invested in quantum mechanics studies, and even in high school, and then into university where I did go to school for physics. And the deeper I dove into it, and I was so blessed with teachers who were also encouraging and gave
Mhm.
me access to resources that were probably premature, considering my grade level, right? But I was always encouraged. And so I really appreciated that, to learn and learn and learn, obsessive curiosity. And the more I got into higher math, the more I got into the unknown edge of physics, what I really found were questions of consciousness, not really questions of
Mm.
matter. And so I said, okay, well then what is matter? What does matter? And I was always curious about the workings of the mind. I always wanted to know about the spirit. And something happened to me when I was doing a project where I was building this like little particle accelerator thing. I don't know, out of a pickle jar or something. But I started to ask questions like, how do particles know they're being looked at? Like, how does anyone know anything? Well, what is knowing?
Mm.
And I just went off of the deep end into a rabbit hole of questions of consciousness. And I came back around to spirituality when I realized it is all connected. There needs to be a bridge in the middle. And I think what shamanism, more than any of the other traditions that I studied, gave me was the yes to standing on the bridge in the middle.
Mm.
Shamanism is really about being the intermediary between this physical realm and the realm of spirit. And a shaman is supposed to navigate the multiple dimensions of reality and possibility and bring back information, create healing in other dimensions of aspects of self. And I think that was really where I heard the yes, like, okay, bring it all together. Take everything you're into and scoop it into one basket and allow all these divergent interests to become one knowing. And I was encouraged not just to become obsessed with tradition after tradition, but to really dive into what I wanted to know. And it's everything is the answer. I want to know everything. And there's nothing cooler than sitting in perfect stillness and realizing that from the shamanic perspective and from the perspective of higher spirituality, if you are all things, if you are simultaneously in all places, concepts like the illusion of time in physics as a time as a plane rather than as like string of pearls on a necklace, and nonlinear reality of time, these concepts seemed very obvious to me. And I think it was because of my perspective of spirituality that it wasn't one or the other anymore. I could stand in the
Yeah.
bridge between two worlds. And my favorite thing even now is to bring all of that together. So I work I did eventually switch to finance because I had a hard time with money and I wanted to understand it. I didn't understand it, and I
Mm,
wanted to never have it use me. I wanted to be able to use it as a tool in this world. So I learned about
mhm.
money and business consulting. I did the C-suite thing, like the whole deal, CFO positions, the whole shit. And but always in the background was this like nagging work with spirituality. I started getting involved with sacred medicine practices and indigenous traditions. Was always interested in this, found a lot of comfort in it because in my culture, Cajun culture is still very much connected in a lot of ways to the indigenous tradition that it shares. For those unfamiliar with a very niche community in the US, it's French and Indian, basically. So Huma or Choctaw Indian
Right.
married with early French settlers during the colonialism period, and they lived in the bayous and the swamps and the backwaters. So my culture still contains a lot of indigenous wisdom and actually some Choctaw
So this
words.
is,
So,
sorry, honey, this is the
yeah.
Cajun culture that you mentioned?
Cajun, right? So a lot of people are
Cajun.
familiar with like spicy chicken and they'll call that like Cajun spiced. It comes from this culture. It's very small group
Okay.
of people. But it still
Uh-huh.
does contain a lot of indigenous wisdom and even some indigenous language in the language group. So for me, it was sort of natural progress. We have a different perspective on death as a change rather than an end, right? So I think it
Mhm.
gave me access both to indigenous wisdom because it was built into my upbringing and also into understanding these like higher concepts in science, right? So as I started to work with really the mind, and then I was doing the work in business and finance. What I loved was growing things, raising entrepreneurs into success in business. And then I started working
Mm.
with spiritual entrepreneurs because this was really my fixation, was working in spirits somehow. And I hit what most shamans will hit, which is a moment of losing everything and everything falling apart.
Mm.
And then a new life filling in its place. We were just talking about the power of transformation. So my life really shifted and I committed full time to my work in spirit, which has been the most rewarding part of my journey. But I really attribute my organization, my success, my capacity to communicate and teach to the background in um, organization, in structure, in expressing concepts and having steps and processes and flows to things. I feel like as I've learned from amazing teachers in my life and mentors in my life, I find that oftentimes in the space of spirituality, there's sort of a disconnect between what I can do and how I can teach that. And so I find
Mhm.
that my gift is actually in my background in hard sciences. Like, what is the step by step? What is the process? How does that work in
Mhm.
life? Like, what does that mean? And I feel
Mhm.
like that fixation on integrating these different perspectives has really made my work so good. What even just focused on spirituality, I think
Mhm.
is that like completely derailed from what you asked? You asked
No,
me about the
no, no,
teaching,
not at
right?
all. No, no, no. You've just beautifully unpacked the story, your trajectory, your learning, your growth, your inner growth, outer growth.
Mm, right. I
What's
feel like
really interesting, yeah,
there's no
sorry, go ahead.
way to there's no way to be sufficiently um, entitled to teach transformation without having owned that process oneself,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah,
But in a way, it's
yes,
also always been there.
yes. Yeah, so, so, so much. Yes. Um, hmm. So there are there's just so many like ways that we could go with this conversation, but actually, I'm just going to honor what I think is fascinating about what you said in terms of when you were describing your strength around the idea of structure, how that's your strength, and sort of learning to ask questions and learning the process has helped you in your spiritual work. And so when you were saying that, I was what I was sort of seeing, because I'm really visual. So when people talk, I sort of I perceive energy and the world like in moving images, I see images, right? So what I was seeing is I was seeing these beautiful, oh, what's that game? Tetris? Is it Tetris?
I love
It
Tetris.
was
It's a life skill.
like, right? So what I was saying was, you know, like your spirit, your shaman spirit engaging in the physical realm, like pieces of Tetris coming down into a structured kind of foundation or something, right?
That's
Which
how
I
I
thought
feel.
was really right. Which I thought was really interesting because it's the opposite for me. Like I
Mm.
have to work on structure. I am, for me, I'm actually, my experience is that I'm perpetually connected to the field of potential, the infinite field of potential. And so when something comes in that feels a certain way in my body, that signals to me that is mine, or for me to bring onto this earthly plane, then I need to put effort into structuring that so it can manifest in matter, right?
Mm.
And so it's the other way. It kind of felt like it was the other way for me. And I find that so fascinating because what's really important about this is that by nature, flow is much more important than rules, as in we all different, and giving people the opportunity to discover their own flow and or process is another way to say it, is so important, as opposed to saying, this young, you're going to do it, anything outside of this box is wrong, don't you dare think for yourself.
Right.
Right? And
I
so
love
I
that.
just think that that's so beautiful, honey. I love I love what you say, and I'm so in awe of it because at, that didn't come naturally to me. Like the structure, the more masculine kind of structured, it didn't come naturally to me. I've worked really hard to learn how to do that because I can just be plugged in and away with the fairies forever.
Right.
But all that did for a lot of my life was it gave me permission to disassociate from this physical life.
Mm.
And so I've had to learn to be in my body
Mm-hmm.
and to bring that in confidently,
I
right?
get that. And I love that because I feel like what you learn in business is that, you really should just stick to your core competency and allow the things that are not your strengths to be brought on board in the form of a team, right? Or in the form of learning, which I think is great. A lot of the practitioners that I work with, because I work a lot with like healers and teachers and trainers and like this, energy workers, all kinds of whatevers. And I love that because I get to be around it all the time. It's super fun. But I think that when I started working with these types of entrepreneurs, I realized that the biggest problem wasn't really business issues. It was groundedness. It was expression in the physical dimension, which is so fulfilling and so joyful when done well. But I think we're also not taught that a lot. And that's okay because your core competency is in what it is that your magic is. And we all have our own unique magic anyway. So my favorite thing is to be able to bring those together and then offer them from a perspective where it feels natural to me to bring structure, organization, and expression to a world that I'm so passionate about, that
Yeah.
spiritual aspect, the practitionership, the energy work, I do a lot with like dream work and visionary states and sacred medicines and like all this good, juicy, fun, like out of body stuff. But then when you do come back in your body, what do you do with it? And your life should be amazing. Life is meant to be lived. It's meant to be joyful. It's meant to feel free. And a lot of really spiritual people find the body to be a prison. And I would rather it be an airplane, a vehicle for a tremendous flight, a joyful experience. And for me, I feel like that's what I get to give from, because I have the capacity to see from that structured perspective automatically, which I love being able to give that, because I also operate in the spiritual environment and do a lot of teaching and learning in that space as well. So I love that you said that, because I feel like that's especially now, a more and more common thing that I hear, and it's supposed to be that way. That calling and that compulsion towards a spiritual space, when it's overwhelming, you answer it, right? And when it's overwhelming, it can also override the capacity to be grounded. But look at you. I mean, you've got your podcast going, you're a coach, like you're doing all the things in the physical world too. And
Oh
I
yeah, it's
find
all
that
good
absolutely
now.
wonderful. I love
Yeah.
them.
It's all good now. But
Yeah,
that took some effort. And you
sure.
know what's really interesting? I didn't even know that it was a thing initially, like 20 years ago. Like I
Hmm.
didn't even know that it was a thing, because the spiritual teaching. So I first started to learn how, like meditation strategies
Sure.
and pranic healing when I was 18. That was
Hmm.
back in 1989. Like that was a few years ago, right? That it's
Sure.
been big, right? So 30 years ago, spiritual teachings were about, you know, angels are out there. So you project
Yes.
yourself outward, right? It's
Hmm.
the it was only really at the turn of the century that there was that and sort of the early noughties that started to shift, right? That
You crack
started
me.
that started to shift, where we started to come back into our bodies more and
Hmm.
understand
Right.
that God or universe or divine energy is from inside
It's
out.
within.
It's not
Yes.
from
Yes.
prayer to out there
Hmm.
somewhere, right? Or up there
Right.
somewhere, and then eventually we talked more about Gaia and the energy from the earth coming
But I
up
feel
and
like that's
yeah.
the concept that overrides a lot of the unspoken rules about spiritual living. So, for
Mm,
example, what I believe and what I
mm,
feel like is rising now in popular space as well is that if everything is an expression of the divine within, then your life is a projection of that knowing,
mm,
which means it also is divine too. I think there's
mm,
been this idea that poverty is spiritual, and you have to be poor, you have to be going through shit all the time, you have to have issues in order to be ascending, and that money is evil, and that ascension symptoms mean that you're somehow better, and all of this garbage that I actually do not believe in at all, but I totally heard a lot. And that to be doing well in life must somehow mean that you're disconnected from what's really spiritual. I don't believe in that whatsoever. I feel like if you are truly connected to the knowing, the inner knowing that the divine is inside, then none of that becomes relevant at all. Because if you are an aspect, an extension of all that is, of the divine anyway, then everything around you should be a function of that knowing, which means everything is at your disposal. The possibilities are endless. This life is your dream anyway. Dream it up, have a great time. And for me, listening to a spiritual guru talk about the nobility of poverty and yet the divine is within, is like taking a diet advice from somebody who's always been skinny. Like, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't hear you. You know what I mean? I just don't feel it. I don't believe this anymore. And I feel like we have this, still there's something in our culture that says that in order for something to be excellent, it must be hard. I also do not believe in that anymore either. I think that, no pain, no gain, right? I think that that's built into the spiritual construct. Oh, my favorite, the ego is evil, it must be punished. The ego is the self-identification in this life. It's the discernment mechanism that says, you should look both ways before crossing the street. It is a good breakfast versus a bad idea to eat candy for breakfast. Like, these are functions of the expression of your sense of spirit in the material world. And I fully believe in a healthy, happy, constructive, beautiful life made entirely of the realization that spirit comes from within to without. That the material world, the denser realms, are an aspect of your experience, not the totality of your experience, and also not to be rejected from experience. They're there for us to learn, they're there for us to grow, and we need the ego aspect, we need the material aspect, or we wouldn't have chosen it. You know, something meaningful is here if we choose it. And I find that, especially in the spiritual path, choice seems to be something that's been removed. Like, you don't choose the path, it finds you. It's a calling. You know, you're destined to be poor and miserable and have migraines because you're a healer. Like, I don't believe in any of that shit. You know what I mean? And I find that that ruffles a lot of feathers. But my perspective now, and what I do a lot of speaking on now, and this will be my TED Talk soon, I promise you, Dijana, it's happening, is where we can take modern learning and perspectives and marry it with these traditional ideals. There's a perspective now of looking back into indigenous lifeways. I mean, especially where you're at in Australia, but it's in here in the US and in Europe as well, and in South America. I mean, it's just become outrageous. The view that there's this like illusion, this fantasy that indigenous perspectives are somehow better. And there are a lot of things in shamanic traditions that I don't think a lot of modern people are really aware of, and we're fantasizing and exoticizing about these perspectives. They need to be upgraded too, you know, as does the modern way. And I think if we bring them together, we find holistic healing, right, as a species. And I think that's really, we were just talking about transformation before we went live, which I think is super fun. We have such good rapport, and I love that. I think the evolution is in bringing these together now. It's like, is it modern medicine or is it herbalism? Well, honey, it's both. If you're bleeding out, no amount of herbs are going to help you. You know, if you need an organ removed, you know, you need modern medicine, baby, you know. But if you're having some stomach issues, actually herbalism may help you better. So how do we bring those together? And I got really lucky. I lived in Mexico for some amount of time. I opened a healing center there. And I'm actually going back there in a couple of weeks. Super excited. Yay. I miss my home. And there, I think in a strange way, because they, what we would call in a developed nation, what we would call maybe with a lack of resources down there, I find actually they have more resources, because not every hospitalist, doctor, or whatever that I've spoken to down there would prefer to talk to you about your lifestyle and local supplements and herbs. And they all have a knowledge of this as well, where I find in a lot of modern Western medicine, it's this or that. You know, it's modern Western medicine and magnesium supplements aren't going to help you. You know, where actually that may be everything you need. So I love that there's an embracing of both sides of the coin. And I feel like with indigenous perspectives, I feel like with these mindset issues that come from, you know, a spiritual lineage that we're growing out of into something new now, we can take a little bit of each, but it's time to bring it into something new. And I know that your whole platform is about bringing everything together. And for me, I'm so passionate about that, because I am a product of that message. And for me, it's my passion, my greatest passion, beyond the dream work, beyond the therapy. You know, I got educated in NLP and hypnosis and all the things that, you know, was the modern transformation psychological process. And I also studied indigenous traditions, and I also studied Ayurveda, and I also studied in herbalism from the Americas. And what I found was we need both, but we need to upgrade it. It doesn't work sometimes. There's incompatibility there, which I think is why there's this fantasy. We need to go back to living with Mother Earth. Okay, well, you do know that jaguars eat people, right? Like, is that really what you want? So, like, how close to the earth are we trying to get? You know what I mean? Like, there are some things that I think it's worth addressing. And I think in a lot of ways, there's like an illusion, right? A fantasy of what's correct. And that comes in all of these spaces, but I think especially in the spiritual space, because there's a longing for the connection with the earth, a longing for the connection with each other, a longing what really is there for the connection with the self, the real self, the true self, like what you said, the spirit self. And I don't think that is distinct from the self that is in the material world. I think that's part of the beauty of the material world, is the seeking and the acknowledging of the spirit and divine self within that experience and in expression in the experience of this material life. And that doesn't mean becoming a spiritualist because you feel divine inside. It means bringing divinity into commercial real estate, if that's what you're into. You know what I mean?
Mm,
I love that.
mm,
Again, a
mm.
tangent. How does this happen?
Look, what I'm essentially hearing you talk about here is, and it's something that I made a note that I wanted to talk to you about. In your bio that you sent me, the thing that stood out most to me, actually, and I mean, I could talk to you about every single thing that you mentioned. It was wonderful. But the thing that stood out most to me is spiritual leadership,
Oh,
because I think I just, we haven't got it yet. We're
mm,
not there yet. We haven't quite worked out what that actually means, because we have authorities and we have political leadership and we have, principals at school and teachers and spiritual teachers as well, like gurus and shamans, etc. But we haven't, I have not really seen, heard, experienced a spiritual leader that I feel truly understands the merging of the two. And I say this because exactly sort of for the reasons that you were talking about. If we've been in this industrial age and we obviously are witnessing that a lot of that doesn't work, not everything, but a lot doesn't work, and that are some of those old structures now collapsing, right?
sure.
Because they need to.
Of course. It's
And
time.
then we go from one polarity experience over to the other extreme, as in we want to hug trees all day long and be eaten by tigers, like you said. That doesn't freaking work either.
Right.
So if we are oscillating in polarities, I think that's our lesson. When the, there is there is something that needs to happen with the conditioning of the survival mind, where we
Yes.
begin
Mm,
to reconcile those extremities and move more to that center, right? So that we can then find the best of both worlds. It's like I was telling, my son was saying to me, oh, this girl asked me out and I'm not sure. And I'm like, want to be with the boy. And I'm like, but why do you have to choose? Life is about, why can't you spend time with your friends and also go and have this experience with a girl that I know that you like? Go have the life experience. You don't have to choose. You have
exactly.
the honor of experiencing both at this point. Go live that life. Go,
Yes.
right? And
I
it can
think
be something as simple
Boolean
as that.
thinking, I think, was the problem, especially when we got to like Abrahamic traditions. There's a lot of Boolean thinking there. It's one or zero.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
it's black or it's white. And that's not
Okay.
true. That's not how life works. And
Mm,
actually, my favorite um, pattern here is the rise of the influence of women in leadership
mm,
positions, and women's thinking tends to be more grayscale, whereas male thinking tends to be more Boolean. And we all obviously have each of these in us. What I think our culture is starting to express is the capacity to contain grayscale. And I love that so much. I love that. And yes, the pendulum will always swing back and forth, and it needs to, because only when we
sure.
meet our extreme will we know where Buddha's middle way really is, right? And so we're
Mm,
obsessed again, culturally, and in a lot of ways, in many parts of the globe, but especially in the Americas and Europe right now, we're obsessed with this indigenous traditions. And I was just on the phone with a client the other day, and she was telling me, like, I just really want to connect with my indigenous ancestors. I'm like, you mean the ones so pissed about the genocide? Is that what you're trying to connect with? Because there may not be the like love and peace and tree hugging that you think. A lot of people don't realize that indigenous history, I mean, even in the Americas, was not this like fantasy living in the trees. There were cities full of millions of people. They had industrialization. They had specialized trade. They had institutionalized education. Like these were like actual cities. There were millions of people here. This wasn't like, you know, 5 teepees in the woods living harmoniously with the land. I mean, there was that too, as there is that too now. Homesteaders, etc., farms, ranches, whatever. But there's also, you know, a whole history that we fantasize and forget to connect with, in its honest way, you know. And I think that I love what you said about touching on leadership, and it is one of my favorite topics because I find, especially in the shamanic community now, over the last, I don't know, years, whatever, that I get really soapboxy about this category. So I don't know if you really want to jump in because I've seen a lot of crap. And it offends me personally because it gives a bad rap to everybody. Not all Catholic priests touch boys, but the ones that do give everybody a bad rap. You know what I mean? Some of them are really there because they just really love God, you know? They just really want to be with that. And I get that. I work in spirituality too. I'm a priest in my traditions. But, you know, that I feel like I've definitely met spiritual leaders who are not showing up that way. And I feel like there's this fantasy around specifically shamanism as it's growing in popularity again with the advent of sacred medicine practices, specifically ayahuasca, that it's a vine, it creeps, it's creeping. It's doing what it does. It's stretching as far as it can, and that's what it does. And I love it. My favorite teacher, and actually my partner now, I loved her so much I decided to marry her, is a maestra of ayahuasca. So I've learned a lot about that. And her, her one of her greatest strengths is her intensity, and her intensity comes from what is called accountability. And there's a story from South America of the jaguar. Jaguar medicine is really important in South American medicine traditions, especially in the work with ayahuasca, specifically. If you're into that, if you know what it is, cool. If you don't, look it up. It's everywhere now. There's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation now as well. But because she creeps, there's a lot of practitioners that, in my opinion, have no business practicing. And it's a balance between how do I be in non-judgment and how do I also stand for what matters to me and what I believe should be expressed in leadership. She is a master teacher, is what maestra means. She's the one titled to train and teach shamans. She's like a PhD of shaman. It's not just to teach a shaman. And there's a story in South America of the jaguar, and why the jaguar medicine is so important for shamanic leaders is that the jaguar creeps in the dream time, which is the subconscious mind. It's the aspect of self where the beliefs, the personality, the identity are, right? I do a lot of work with identity and beliefs in the subconscious. It's my favorite thing. That's why I love the dream work and all of that. It's real therapy. Dream work is really like fluffy and out there. No, it's real therapy. It's for PTSD. It's for deep inner knowing. It's for developing psychic skills. Like, it's all that. And I love that. And the jaguar creeps through the dream time and bites the head off of anyone who's not been accountable, who says one thing but does another, who purports to be one thing and then behaves not in accordance. And I feel like there's a lot of, especially shamanic leadership rising now, that purport themselves to be great healers, great leaders, great teachers, and their lives are messed up, their relationships suck, they're egomaniacs, and they love a position of the appearance of authority in an industry which is little understood yet very popular. So, you know, for me, in my sphere, I feel like spiritual leadership contains so many interesting facets. Not only does there need to be accountability, there also needs to be authenticity. You know, I may have moved through, you know, no one can be perfectly healed. I may have moved through a lot of bullshit in my life and done my inner work. I don't get triggered. Almost never get offended. I'm generally in peace, enjoying my life. And it's not because my life is easy, promise. I've had my practice, but I have witnessed myself move with grace through difficult things and difficult moments in my life. And this is how I know that I'm living my message. There's nothing that I share with another that hasn't been working in my life. And if I am not in a good headspace, I cancel my clients. Like, I'm not in a position to practice. And I feel like, but I also am authentic in that. If I'm not in a position to practice, I'm honest. I say, look, I'm not like, I'm feeling a little chaotic right now. I cannot offer help to another when I need to help myself. And I feel like in a leadership position, there's the need to create an image of authority, which comes from a lot of times dishonesty. And I find that to be repulsive because that's not attainable for others, nor is it even genuine. And in the realm of spirit, all things are known. There are no secrets. And you cannot be a good medicine worker without being a halfway decent psychic. And I feel like being able to see through a lot of crap has me constantly juggling the balance between judgment and acceptance, and also discernment, which is a beautiful gift of the material life, discernment. And I'm very pleased that I've moved through my process and I've been able to share with others in a beautiful way that it's not about being in judgment, it's about being in discernment and choosing what is right for you, what is right for another, what is in alignment. It doesn't matter how pure, good, and honest my teachings are. If they don't vibe with you, they don't vibe with you. They're not for you. And that's okay. I don't need to vibe with everybody. I vibe with those with whom I vibe, and that's fine. And it makes me happy because I know I'm full on and doing my best and performing at my highest capacity in those spaces. And I know I'm good at what I do. But I feel like discernment versus judgment is also in alignment with the question of confidence versus arrogance. And I think this is another leadership question because I struggled for many, many years. I'm going to be completely honest with you. And it didn't matter how good I was at my craft. I would still feel insecure. And it took me a series of experiences to really look at myself and say, how can I show up best with insecurity? I can't. That's not authentic. That's not accountable. Leadership is not insecure. I cannot do what I have to do and be like, well, I guess maybe it'll work. Maybe, for you, probably. I have to show up and be with it. You know what I mean? And to work with medicine, it's not a bullshit type of job either. Like, you got to be willing to show up in that space with a lot of strength. And just like what you said, that masculine aspect is really present in my line of work too. Also paired and meshed with that feminine compassion, loving.
Oh my God, so much. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like in a leadership role, you need to bring those together because there can't be insecurity in it, but there also can't be arrogance in it. And so I've learned that, and this is just my perspective, that arrogance is feeling like you're better than others and you've learned everything you need to know, that you already know everything. Whereas confidence is knowing that you are good at what you do. So I'm so grateful to be able to say I have confidence, but not arrogance. And I'm constantly checking myself on that shit because I do not want to step into that space of arrogance. Arrogance oversteps other boundaries. Arrogance knows better. And I don't believe that that's a good space. To be a good teacher, you have to be a good learner. That's it. You have to constantly be open to learning. And again, obsessive curiosity, right? Voracious appetite for knowledge and for experience and for wisdom has driven my entire life, and I pray it never stops. When it does, that'll be the day I die for real. But so I wonder, there are obviously a lot of qualities of leadership, especially in the spiritual space. I don't think that there's a singular message for leadership in spiritual space. I think that I love to be on the cutting edge. I love trends and patterns. I learned this in economics. I learned this in the sciences. I learned this in spirituality. I want to be on the edge of everything that is to be known. So for me, I often find myself on the front edge, sounding a little bit inaccessible until things seem to catch up a little bit, and all of a sudden it makes sense, right? Which is fine by me. I'm okay being a little out there, until the times catch up. I'm totally down with that. I'm comfortable knowing myself, right, and expressing what it is that's genuine for me. I also know that there are different messages for different people that we all need at different times. So it's okay to be very into one thing or another teacher, and to tradition hop. I don't think it's necessary. Now, obviously, in traditional work, it is necessary to be disciplined and committed to really deepen the practice. But I also know that, when a sufficient knowledge or experience or wisdom is gained, that it's okay to continue to expand. Spirituality, spirit is expansive, and expansion may look different for everyone and at every different phase. And I find that my favorite teachers are the ones who have tradition hopped, who have looked for answers and then realized they were in themselves for their answers, and who saw those reflections in different traditions, and who found those reflections to be reflections of an inner wisdom. I think that's what's amazing. So I don't think leadership has to do so much with the message itself or whatever the flavor, perspective, or language it comes in. I think it really has to do with character. I think it has to do with perspective, and I think it has to do with behavior and accountability. I've met a lot of leaders who touch people inappropriately. I don't find that acceptable in the slightest. So for me, the irony of it is, I love, and I never thought I would be in a position of leadership, but I love it so much because I feel like I get to be in the sharing of what has helped me grow, and I'm so passionate about that. And in that teaching how to discover the inner wisdom, I teach shamanism, I teach craft magic, I teach all kinds of shit. But my favorite thing that I interweave into all of that, it doesn't matter if it's a dream work course, it doesn't matter if it's one-on-one coaching and shamanism training, I don't give a shit. For me, it's terrible language, right? Is to
really, it makes point.
Is to really teach how to connect with that inner wisdom. And I think that the number one focus of a leader should be to inspire other leaders, not to acquire followers. So for me, the number one thing I teach, because that's egomania, that is not leadership. So for me, my favorite quality is, qualities are really good behavior, accountability, application into your life, live your message, whatever it is, just live it out, be really with it, and share in a way that creates inspiration, not adoration. That I think is the most important part. That's probably my favorite soapbox. And I feel like as we're looking at Indigenous traditions, there's a lot in there to unpack too that doesn't work in the modern space. Like in the medicine work, there's this idea that during the initiation processes, which are brutal, that part of the initiation process is survival. If you live, then you're more entitled to share and teach medicine, right? But in the modern Western space, we're there to heal, not to die. Dying is not good healing for us. It's living better, right? So there are some perspectives in Indigenous traditions that I don't feel really mesh, and I don't feel need to either, because exactly what we said in the very beginning of this conversation, I do not believe in the necessity of suffering. If our physical life, just like what you said, is an expression of our inner divinity, then what part of divinity asks for suffering, pain, and misery? What part of, we all know what the qualities are, right? Unconditional love, compassion, forgiveness, joyfulness, love, and peace, and all the good hippie shit that we all know and love, right? That's in every tradition about every aspect of divinity. That is the ultimate goal of all wisdom traditions. Peace and harmony and love and all the good stuff, right? Nothing in there says to me, suffer harder. Nothing. So I think the evolution is in the release of suffering. And I think that's where my work differs too, because I don't sit there and go through everyone's life traumas. I say, okay, are you ready to release your attachment to trauma? Blow out the whole Rolodex of stories at that point, and move towards and embodying the aspect of the divinity within, which is Love yourself unconditionally. Love your life unconditionally. Be okay with forgiving your experiences and knowing that they're there to teach you something beautiful. Find the blessing in them, right? And I got to do this shit in my life too. I'm always right on trend with that too.
Yeah.
And it shows up for
Yeah.
me in a serious kind of way all the time. But I don't suffer through it. I don't feel like suffering is part of that story anymore. I don't believe in poverty as spiritual.
Okay, hang on. I'm going to stop you there, and I'm going to
Please.
ask you something that I think is really important, honey. Because I have a belief that the soul reincarnates more than once into a physical body.
Sure.
And part of that is the evolution of the actual soul, meaning
Right.
the expression of the divine wants to experience certain things, and then there's, different things that happen. Part of that soul evolution is to go into that unconscious part of our brain, the human brain, and connect to parts of us that are still in pain. So maybe we carry some pain from past lifetimes, or
Sure.
timelines that we're connected to, etc. Right? So
Sure.
that would be maybe that jaguar journeying through the unconscious, and right, the learning,
The underworld.
the underworld, etc. There's many references there.
Sure.
And then to let go, to learn and let go of those
Yes.
old energies and timelines that we have perhaps unconsciously been holding on to.
Sure.
And we haven't closed the cycle of learning, right?
Right. Well, that is what is called karma, right? Karma is just information, right? That we're clinging to.
Sure.
Right.
Hang on. Let me ask you the question. I'm not at the question yet. So the thing is, and I know this was true for me, when I tapped into that core wounding or core pain that I was carrying, suffering was part of the letting go process.
Sure.
So when you say that you don't suffer through it and you don't believe in it, I can't see how that can be bypassed, even if it's temporary. Because if you are bypassing suffering, you're bypassing actual true healing.
I love that you said that.
Tell me, and I can, so when there's consciousness around this, so you and me understand how we no longer have to suffer. But initially, with that sort of undoing of the old, there's invariable shadow work that happens. There's that kind of walking through the what is that sort of religious
through the valley of the shadow of death.
Valley of the shadow of death, right? So you have to walk through that goddamn scary as shit place within you to face all your fears and everything in order to emerge as new, in order to rebirth, right? And that can feel like immense suffering.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely. Sure
So
can.
talk to me about that, right?
I love how deep you dive straight away. I love that. I do. I think that's amazing. So, how many times in life have we looked back and said, wow, I made that harder than I could have?
Yep.
Like maybe I didn't need to drag out that breakup like that. Now that I'm looking back, I could have been done with that way sooner. Right? We've all done it. We've all been there. I think that there is a perspective in the subconscious mind that, well, keep in mind, at a base reptile level, fear is essential. Fear is what keeps us from wandering out at night and getting eaten by lions on the Serengeti. You know what I mean? Like fear keeps us alive. And so
it's part of that ego sort of survival instinct
it's a good
that we are born with.
In a lot of ways, because it keeps us alive, especially when we're younger and we did a lot of dumb things. Fear is the only thing that keeps us on earth in some cases, right? Like, oh, I'll get my ass beat by mom, or like, I might get eaten by a lion. It keeps us safe. I think at a certain point, though, we evolve out of that. We realize,
Yeah.
okay, I don't need to be afraid of my world. I just need to understand reason, right? Okay, don't walk down that weird dark alley. You know what I mean? Okay, that's reasonable now. So I think fear is the primordial impulse that protects us from dangerous experiences. I think it also becomes overriding. So I think that as we evolve, again, this is the perspective of no pain, no gain. Like, I have to go through my suffering. Again, this is shamanic initiation to the death and rebirth. You have to die to be reborn. Death is something that we innately fear, especially in the modern Western culture. In other cultures, it's not really something feared so much as generally avoided, but also inevitable and an embraced part of life, and a beautiful part of life too. So, I think that's also a little bit cultural. So I think that if we can look back and say on any given experience, well, it probably made that harder than it had to be, then we can also look back at our learning and our growth and say, wow, I resisted that experience, or I avoided that learning. And working in shamanic medicines, I deal specifically in fear. Right? Fear, beliefs, and identity. And fear is actually a huge part of beliefs and identity, especially in the modern space. I feel like a lot of our natural tendencies are built around fear. We're moving away from pain rather than towards pleasure. Our motivations are based on fear. Like, our limitations are based on fear. There's a lot in there. So this is why one of my favorite things is to deep dive into this topic, which means, yeah, you got to face that shit. Right. But I also,
and I
believe
think,
that it's possible
sorry,
to do
I'm
that.
just gonna sorry, Dylan, I know we could like really unpack this, but I think what you just said is so important, and the point I was hoping you were going to make, because there's a reason why I asked this.
Of
And
course.
the reason was that we're afraid of the fear itself, and so we
Yes.
don't stretch ourselves,
Right.
right, which is, so
Yes.
we create, it's
Right.
like we create this illusion of
Mm-hmm.
suffering before we've
Mm-hmm.
even gotten off the couch.
Right. And it feels so justified. Fear and
Yeah.
anger, they're related, and they're extremely justified. The mind will come up with every 100 million reasons why it's correct and justified. But the truth is, all those justifications are made of an illusion, right? And the fear is what's creating them in the first place. And what we fear most is fear itself, and also change. We fear change innately. The
Yes.
unfamiliar. When we learn to embrace and become comfortable and joyful in the unfamiliar, we have an entire infinite dimensions of possibility available to us, and we're completely liberated to make decisions out of real-time self and wants and desires and beliefs, rather than patterns that are created and stuck and wrote by fear. And I love that this was a topic that you really want to address, because it's definitely a favorite for me. And I love what you're saying, and I completely agree with you. That the biggest fear really is fear. And especially in medicine work, a lot of people come in and say, I'm scared. Like, well, okay, that's normal. You're about to have a massive transformation. You're gonna have to face your shit. But we talk a lot also about shadow self, and the way Carl Jung originally wrote that was that the shadow is the unseen part. That's the secret murderous thoughts. Okay, if you've never had murderous thoughts, you're lying. Okay, we're still, animals on earth, we kill to eat, like, you've had murderous thoughts. We always wanted to kill that ex, at one time. So, like, it's okay. It just doesn't mean you have to entertain it, right? You didn't actually kill the ex, presumably. I mean, maybe you did, but we have alligators around here, whatever you're
Yeah,
into.
most don't. Let's just say most don't.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's okay to say, okay, this is also part of the human experience, to have murderous thoughts, to be somehow like dark. But the shadow self isn't just the dark stuff that we don't really want to confront. It's also the hidden desires, the hidden talents, the secret gifts, the secret passions that, you always wanted to be a singer, but one time when you were 5, your mom had a headache and looked at you and said, shut up, kid, no one wants to hear it. And you, like, internalize that and shut down because you're 5
Mm.
and you don't even remember it, but now you have a fear of opening up, and it's because you're not good enough, and like all these complexes form around it.
Yeah.
But the truth is there's also like secret desire and secret gifts in there too. And I've met people in ceremony who have never sang their entire life out of horror, like their worst fear is karaoke, you know, and they open their mouth and beautiful things come out, and they're like freely launched into a whole new reality of expression and possibility. And that's also shadow self, right? So
Mm.
we're often afraid of turning that light on inside. That is what ayahuasca does specifically, and bufo and
Mm.
these other beautiful medicines, and deep introspection and meditation and beliefs work and identity stuff. But when you turn that light on inside, something amazing happens. You know, there is no shadow in the light except when there is an object which casts it. When we can remove the objects, the experiences, the attachments, the whatevers, right? Then what we find is something beautiful. It's just light. And I think we fear also our own potential, because then we will have to do something with it. And I think that that is a tremendous fear for so many. If I wasn't blocked by my crappy childhood and that one bad ex and that thing that teacher said and my own ADHD and this and that and this and that, and then you would have to show up fully and differently and honestly. And I think that is a huge driver of fears. And I think that that's something that I love diving into. And sometimes it requires going through the valley of the shadow of death. And sometimes
Yeah.
it doesn't. And I think my evolution in my work, and God bless, thank you, Goddess bless, all the gods, whatever you're into, that I have been blessed with a maestra of ayahuasca who has said yes to me in evolving. And so our practice has moved out of tradition into the modern space, into the modern mind, into the modern world in a way that eases the transformation, in a way that brings gentleness and compassion to an otherwise turbulent, dark, strange, and bizarre experience wrought with like fear and inner demons, and instead just brings a candle into a dark room and says, yes, you can be free. Yes, it's
Mm.
okay to say, to be done with all of the attachments, to be done with suffering, and to be done with fear itself. Because you're so right. The biggest fear really is just the fear, the facing of the
Mm.
fear. You're so right about
Mm.
it. And I love watching fearful people blossom out of the attachment to it. There's really few things very sweeter in life. It's amazing.
Mm. Mm. I've been having these conversations lately about um, how somehow in this modern world, as we continue to make things easier for ourselves, like technologically we are so advanced and moving forward, like leaping, quantum leaping forward, and there's
Sure.
all this stuff going on and everything is at the tip of our fingers, and we can order anything online and it shows up the next day at our doorstep, and blah blah blah, all these things, and the focus is on ease and um and comfort. I've been having these conversations, including with my son, some clients, and some other adults, how I don't remember seeing anywhere that everything in life, that the entire goal of living is to not feel any discomfort ever again, ever. Like nobody ever told me that the point of me being alive was to always just be super comfortable and never to experience any discomfort
Sure.
whatsoever. And I'm just, because I'm finding this to be a necessary conversation after being told that we have to sit at home for 2 years and not go outside, etc. I'm finding that it's a little bit more, people have more anxiety about living,
Mm-hmm.
period, right? Out in community, in nature. And so I had a conversation with Ronan, my son, and said, because he's been umming and ahhing, he's being guided to follow a path, to revisit a path from his childhood. And he got really excited, and then the fear kicked in, and I've been watching him, his mind, his insecurity about it, begin to talk himself out of it. And so we had a conversation about, okay, you're young, you're learning, this is your experience, but just understand at no point are you meant to always just be with what's familiar
Right.
in your life, because anything new that you do or you revisit, there's going to be a point or a moment or
Yeah.
several moments of unfamiliar and potentially some emotional and mental discomfort until you get familiar. Nobody ever said that you are supposed to just be comfortable all the time. How
Right.
boring. You're meant to
So true.
live. You're meant to have these experiences. But there's just this anxiety about
Sure.
the unfamiliar, which is the bigger picture of that, is what you were saying,
Right.
basically.
But
The
you're
the
right,
the fear.
and you said a word earlier that I loved. You used the word bypassing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started developing this perspective to bring into shamanic traditions, which are about suffering, right, and
Mm-hmm.
going through
Right.
it and all of this, I asked myself that question. Does bringing ease bypass the value of the experience?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's about a change of perspective. All of it's a change of mind, right? All of it, everything. Right? So, yes, you have to be willing to get uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that that has to be suffering. Discomfort
You're
comes from
right.
a
Yep.
lack of familiarity.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned in my life to find great joy in the discomfort that comes with unfamiliarity. Right?
Yeah,
I
I
love
agree.
being familiar because if
Mm-hmm.
you want to be different, if you want to see different, if you want to do different, you got to be indifferent. And different is naturally uncomfortable and unfamiliar. I have learned to embrace and really relish that feeling of like, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is fucking weird. This is too much. I love that moment, and therefore it becomes easy. And I have my moments, like I'm writing a book, and I've been writing this book for a while. I've been taking care of family too. So as I'm approaching my publishing date, I started to get a little bit uncomfortable and say, okay, well, am I ready to be published this way? I mean, I've got ebooks and stuff everywhere, but am I ready to be like a published author? And that's a different caliber of like expression. And I made it into this big deal in my head, and I realized, wait a minute, who cares? First of all, no one. So that's number one. But two, of the grand scheme of the entire cosmos swirling around a tiny blue marble in the oblivion of space, no one gives a shit. But also beyond that, perspective is everything, right? To be in that moment of saying, oh my God, this is really uncomfortable, brought me so much joy, because it meant I was getting out of my comfort zone. And this is a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot expand if you do not expand. And expanding means getting out of what is familiar, right? But then I asked myself, if I shortcut the growth process, is that bypassing? Does that make the experience less valuable? And then I asked myself, if the resources available to us still produce the same outcome, but with less misery, is that bypassing or is that evolution? If I can do the same thing and get the same outcome, but easier, more peaceful, more calm, more joyful, is that not inherently divine itself? Like, aren't those the qualities of divinity that we're trying to express in the world anyway? Isn't that
So, so when you describe it like that, what I'm hearing is that you're describing flow. So being in the flow, so your
yeah,
natural highest potential, right?
right?
Being in the flow of that. That requires, you and I both know, that requires understanding. That requires presence. That
Yes.
requires an energetic maturity, an emotional maturity, like a
Hmm.
mindfulness. It
Yeah.
requires all of those things to work together as a
Yeah.
team, right? And that's something that we inherently are. We have to remember, but perhaps recognize even more so in the beginning that is who we are, right? Of that
Yes.
and highest potential, right? So I'm hearing what you say, but there's a lot of people that are going to be watching this conversation that are going to go, oh, that's over there somewhere. I don't even know how to get there.
It's a
Like, I
polarizing
don't even
idea.
know where
It
to begin.
This idea meets with rejection. Oh no, no pain, no gain. Oh no, I have to go through it. Okay, that's fine. I don't work with those.
Mm.
Most of my clients are originally it was dealing with like substance issues and depression, and I'm very good at this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my practice has evolved to work mostly with healers, leaders, and teachers who are also on the path of
Yeah.
trying to reach their highest actualization. And just what you said, integrating mind, body, emotion, and spirit all together in a single focused direction. We also call that prayer, right? When you're all on board in
Sure.
one direction,
Yeah.
right? We also
All
call that
aboard.
manifestation. We call it the flow
Yeah.
state. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter to me. Maybe
Yeah.
supreme meditation, maybe samadhi, nirvana, heaven, to be in the bliss of divinity when all things are on board, right? In perfect alignment. You can call it whatever you want. It's the same thing. Tefillah, it doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the same state. Yes, you're right. And it is polarizing. For those who are still stuck in the perspective, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no judgment in it. We're all on our journey and in our process where we need to be. So when
It's
I
an
meet people like
evolutionary
this,
process. Yeah.
yeah, and they tell me, "Oh no, that doesn't work. I need to like go through it. I need to be obliterated. I need to die in order to relive." Like, okay, you have your unplug and plug back in if that's what you need. Like, I'm there for that too. I'm okay with that. There's no judgment in it. For me, I've decided I want greater ease because I've done the suffering. Haven't you suffered
Mm.
enough? Why does
Mm.
more suffering lead to freedom from suffering? If you can tell me a good reason why more
Yeah.
suffering leads to freedom from suffering, why does more of the same get different? Why does I don't get that? Like, I believed in this in the past. I honored this. I lived it. I did it the hard way a lot. I did it a lot. I was very stubborn and I did it the hard way a lot. And then I realized,
Mm.
wait, maybe I don't have to. Maybe there's a clearer way. I think that this is actually where modern and ancient can bring together. If we can take ancient wisdom and marry it with modern resources, what we get is easier, better, faster, more efficient. And there's nothing wrong with that to me. To me, I've done the hard stuff. And I look back and I say, wow, I didn't have to do it so hard to get to where I want to go. And we say things like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Tell me if you've heard that expression. Hello, right? Heard that, live that. But does it, or does it make you more bitter? Does it make you more fractious? Does it make you more triggered? I don't think that's stronger. In fact, that's weaker. That's more volatile, more bitter, less resilient. That's not stronger. That's less resilient, right? You've
Mm.
proven to yourself what you can tolerate, but did you really need that to grow? Or can you push your boundaries by in some other way by finding, and look, I pushed my boundaries every way I could find them. I did all kinds of dumb shit in my life to find where my limits were. And instead, what I do now in my life, maybe I've just gotten older, I don't know, is to ask, how far can I expand my own awareness of myself? How far can I push the boundaries of what's possible in this life? How far can I move what's available for me in spiritual skills? Like, how far can I expand my perspective? Those pushing of boundaries I find to be beautiful, inspiring, moving, abundant, joyful, and sometimes rocky, but also it comes with grace because I'm not triggered and brittle and fractious and unresilient. Instead, I'm strong and I'm peaceful and I'm compassionate for myself, not even for those
Mm.
around me, for myself. And so my
Mhm.
life is more smoothed out, more graceful. My relationships are
Mhm.
beautiful. Even the ones that were difficult have a sort of peace to them, that are not that wasn't available to me with the perspective that I need more pain to have more gain. I don't believe in this anymore. Sure, you can do 10 hours of cardio, or you can do one Tabata circuit and be done with it, and you have a better outcome. You know what I mean? So why would you choose 10 hours of cardio if you can do one 20-minute Tabata circuit and have the same outcome? Why would you do that? Why would you choose that? Well, maybe you like 10 hours of cardio. Go for it. No judgment. I'm going to do 20 minutes of Tabata and go back to my life. Okay. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It was a very interesting awareness that I arrived to through my journey eventually, which has been true for me for quite some time now. But I always know if I'm checking in with myself, or even if I'm not, just going through the day, if I'm feeling a deep peace within me,
Right.
that's my marker that I'm in my center. I know for some people it's perhaps if they feel joy, or, there's different ways to measure, I guess, if you will, or discern
Right.
from within yourself where you're at. For me, is that feeling of inner peace. When I'm at peace, the rest sorts itself out, because my choices, my decisions, my behavior, my conscious moments are made from that place. Yeah.
What does
From
that
center.
deep inner peace feel like to you? What is that like for you?
I've tried to describe this, and I don't know if I can, other than so it's like I'm probably going to talk in metaphors and visuals. So it feels like I feel it strongest in my center, so just beneath my heart chakra.
Mhm.
It feels like where all parts of me meet, and they're sitting maybe around some sort of a crystal grid, or just a fire somewhere in the forest, and they commune. It's a communion of united parts of me that just then have the one voice that I transmit into the world, from which I function into the world. And it's just strong. And the depth, I guess, comes from the fact that it feels like it's this, but it's also extensions of me, like that expanded part of me into the world. That's sort of, I don't know if that's maybe the best way that I can describe it. And it's just this really beautiful communion of the different parts of me.
That's beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. I always had this idea that peace was sort of like the null in the middle, like it was a zero, of
A
emotion.
0 point. Yeah.
Right. But I have found quite the opposite, that peace is passionate and inspired. And I think I didn't really expect that when I started on my path. I was looking for that zero. I was looking for calm, you know? I was looking to release the rage, and really just be calm and nothing. But there's so much inspiration and passion in that. It's not a zero, but it is a center. So I love how you said that it feels like everything all on board, like everything all together, like a fire in the woods, a campfire in the woods. I think that's beautiful. I love how you put that. I love that. It's awesome.
Because that also then represents that inner fire, the spark, the kundalini,
Right. And that's
all of
harmony.
those things, all of
Right.
those things present in that moment are one.
And
Yeah.
it's harmony. And when everything's online together, Peace is good harmony. That's really wonderful. I love how you said
Yeah.
that. That's awesome. Nice.
That's probably the first time that I've actually described it in quite those words, because
Perfect.
it's a feeling. Yeah, that I know very well. Yeah, not so much the words, and most certainly not something that I reference the feeling, but I don't describe it very often because I'm much more interested in, if I'm talking about it with somebody, for them to share their own experience and for them to even have the experience of that, because it's that experience that's so valuable but can be described for different people in different ways.
Well, like you said, it's an experience. They say to know the Tao is not to speak of it, and the Tao that is spoken of is not the Tao that is known. It's not the real Tao, the true Tao. Right? Right. You're right.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason I love the medicine's work, is because it's so experiential.
Yeah.
It's, we learn through repetition or through experience, a charged experience, and it creates such a
Yeah.
charged experience. And I think peace is what we're all really looking for in the end. All great wisdom traditions tend toward peace, harmony, and unconditional love. And if we can have that experience in this lifetime, it changes everything. It sounds simple, it sounds hackneyed, it sounds trite, and yet we're all secretly looking for it. And when it is had, it is, well, as you said, indescribable.
Kat, I want to say that is like a perfect note to finish on.
Yes.
It is like, I cannot believe that we've been at this for an hour and 20. Can you
No
believe that?
way. Well, longer, because you
Feels
and I
like,
like to talk.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
So, in closing, I want to ask if there are any last words that you would like to offer, share with whoever is meant to see this particular episode.
Yes, thank you. Deep gratitude. Thank you for what you're doing here. Thank you from wherever your inspiration sources. Thank you for your motivation and for your authenticity. You talk about integrating all aspects of self, and you have in so many ways overcome your primordial self to move into an actualized state, to do the things that are uncomfortable and yet offer so much to so many. And it really is inspiring, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. And gratitude is the secret to happiness. It is. And I'm so grateful to you and to the message that you share, and to have met you and to have known you. I'm so grateful for this relationship. I'm grateful for the capacity to give freely, and to share and to love. And so thank you for the window through which I may carry on my soapbox. and for the gift that you offer, that is just you in your growth and evolution. And it's beautiful, it's amazing, it's awesome. And the capacity with which you love is truly incredible. And I love that. So thank you for just being in the world, and for being with me, and for offering what you offer in the space of, in a way others may reach, these things to learn, to broaden the mind and open the heart. And it's a tremendous gift to be part of your story. Thank you very much.
Oh, Kat, they are such beautiful words. I'm truly touched. Thank you, my darling. You beautiful lady. Ooh, hugs to you. Mwah.
Oh,
Wonderful
1,000
lady.
kisses.
Beautiful. All right. So I want to say, which I will in a moment, but to you, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here with me. I know it's quite late where you are, so I'm infinitely grateful for your effort and your energy and your offering and your beautiful, eloquent words. I mean, my God, it's how wonderful is it, like truly, to have such eloquent expressions, throat chakra expressions about this extraordinary work that you're doing and I'm doing, and the helping and the healing profession, and marrying, you know, the science and the spirituality and all these different wonderful aspects of self and modalities together in such highly educated ways, so that, you know, it can be expressed with complete authenticity, transparency, but also credibility, which is just so important on this earthly plane, right?
It is. It is.
So truly, thank you, honey. Thank you. I'm blown away. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So I know that it's late where you are, but would you please stay with me for another few minutes just while I close
My
and
pleasure.
and end the broadcast, and then you and I can just say goodbye to each other properly
Yes, ma'am.
without the audience. All right, honey. Now I'll just finish this up and I'll see you in a moment, okay?
Yes,
All right.
ma'am.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, my loves, I told you it was going to be extraordinary. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, feel free to either write to either of us. Now, I have Kat's bio and all of her social media links and website in the comments beneath. So feel free to write to her directly, or put a comment in, or ask any questions. Connect with her, connect with either of us. You are so more than welcome. I really hope you found something resonant for you in your journey. And on that note, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.